They realize how gray I am.
It doesn't matter for guys. Guys can be gray and it's fine.
I don't know.
Oh, please. Yeah. Y'all don't have anything to worry about with that. So, hey guys, we're live on two different platforms right now. So, if anyone's watching, hi guys, seeing you guys join in, just shoot me like a comment and say, hey, I can hear you loud and clear, just so we know we're good to go. Hi, Angela. Some of you were just in my virtual class. I need it, might need us. Can you hear me? Cool. Awesome. I know there's a bit of an echo in here, so I like to make sure. You're welcome. Well, thank him. Thank you for doing this. So I'm just going to introduce you. This is Dr. Amin, right? I said it right.
Call me Ro.
I'm in my head. I call you Ro. So, but I wanted to be professional on the, things. He is a cardiologist at Sacred Heart Hospital, and he is here to talk meditation with us tonight. So if you have any questions, we're going to make time for that as well. So just comment in the threads wherever you're from. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got into meditation and how it's impacted your life with your personal practice.
Yeah, well, namaste to your followers, and much gratitude to you for inviting me here to share with your guest here. I'm sure many of your guests here online probably know something about meditation. Being a man of science, I knew that it was a good thing. I just didn't know how much of a good thing it was. I needed to know a little bit more about the science to believe in it. So take us back 2013. About a year prior to that, dealing with some personal issues, just not getting to where I needed to be back. Got introduced to a course that actually occurred here locally. I was one of 4 people that showed up.
Wow.
Only to realize the instructor there is actually one of the most famous transcendental meditation teachers in America. It's in Seaside. Her name is Prudence Burns.
I think her.
And the funny story with Prudence Burns, she was one of the remaining individuals that trained under the great Maharishi Yogi, which was the yogi master who brought the Beatles here in the 50s.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
So you just walked into the pot of gold.
Yeah. But again, I was just being introduced to it. I was looking for an outlet to reduce my stress, anxiety, angst, apprehension, insomnia, all the things that we all experience, whether in different walks of life, different backgrounds, and of course different occupations.
Yeah.
And I wanted something more constructive, and I had a stigma still attached to me at that time that mental health was not the way to go. So I turned to this, and this always resonated with me when I was much younger, but this was the opportunity for me just to get my feet wet.
Yeah.
Anyway, from there I went on a few courses and a few meditation retreats, and now I've gone to probably 8 or 9 retreats that range really from 3 to 7 days of sometimes complete silence and sometimes a combination thereof. And then about 2 years ago, when I really wanted to dive into this even further, a mind-body medicine course that was taught by the Harvard faculty came about, and was for physicians to combat this thing we call burnout.
Yeah.
Which right now is the most crucial period of time, as healthcare workers not only here but around the world are dealing with this. And so I went there for a weekend course, was completely mesmerized by everything it was told. It felt right to me. And then from there I took a year-long course to get my certificate and degree.
Wow.
And from there I've just been really passionate about it, and want to spread the joy to everybody else.
Wow.
So,
quite a story. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So when you talk about, or when if someone were to come to you and they are maybe skeptical like you once were, and they want to know the scientific benefits of why a meditation practice would help them, what would you say?
Yeah. Well, so let's back up and answer that question. So meditation, and a lot of people view it differently. There are some folks that find meditation to be just for those hippies,
Mm-hmm.
or the folks that wear yoga pants, or the things that you do when you go out and you trance on the weekends. But honestly, meditation is utilized by all different types of people. And the definition of meditation is also variable. If you read one textbook or one authority or one website, you may get different definitions according to meditation. And that's because the ancient roots of meditation is very different from what we are accustomed to today here in Western part of the world. So for example, yoga, you have a yoga studio. We all know yoga as a movement, but actually true yoga is meditation. It is sitting still and going to the world of transcendence, where the type of yoga you do here in the studio and everywhere else is a type of hatha yoga, which is a different version. But meditation has different categories. The one that's probably most common and most people know about is mindfulness. There's transcendental meditation, which I was alluding to before. That's what the Beatles were into in the 50s and 60s, kind of when they're winning off their psychedelics, to remain still creative and to create their music. They brought him, which was the master at the time, to the United States. And just as a quick, there's something called the Maharishi Yogi effect, where they would go around in the 50s and 60s and people would meditate. They noticed that 20% of crime dropped on that particular day and 5 days afterwards. I mean, that's incredible.
I believe that. 100%.
So, anyhow, so there's transcendental, there's mindfulness, there's vipassana, there's walking meditation is available, and there's loving kindness, so there's all different types, and essentially each category serves a different purpose, but they're all sort of tools in the same box that you use to essentially look at life, hopefully in the best manner. So when we're dealing with stress that is everywhere around us, we can either be more resilient when we have adversity, or not be affected by that particular problem as much we were before, or come up with creative solutions for the problem rather than what we call ruminate in our thoughts, that inner chatter that we all sort of have all the time. And unfortunately, it's mostly negative, not positive.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So with that, the ancient philosophy of meditation really came from Hinduism and Buddhism.
Right.
And then it evolved, just like everything else, to where we are right now. But when you look at some of the neuroscience associated with meditation, this is where, in my opinion, for me, a guy who's a physician, is really exciting. Because now we're able to take everything that the Eastern tradition of philosophers were doing and now incorporate it into some neuroscience that has been backed by really important data, including using MRI studies, etc., to change one's actual lifespan. So, for example, the University of Wisconsin does an incredible job. They have an actual center called the Center for Healthy Minds. They place the most number of research articles associated with the neuroscience and meditations. So, what we know so far, meditation when practiced regularly can create an anti-aging phenomenon to your DNA chromosome.
Wow.
Specifically, what they're doing is you are avoiding this one enzyme that cleaves the ends of the DNA when it replicates. And now you have more DNA, which means that you can create, obviously, a longevity that adds to your lifespan. Two, in terms of the brain function, meditation, especially attention awareness or mindfulness, creates more gray matter. And when you have more gray matter, you're also building your brain, which also then allows you to create another phenomenon called neuroplasticity, which is basically more neurons fire together, they create together, which then fights dementia and malaria.
Wow.
And then lastly, which is dear to me, which is more the cardiovascular system, it affects a phenomenon known as the heart rate variability, which is a fancy medical term for our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system that always fluctuates. So for your listeners, the parasympathetic nervous system is what allows us to finally wind down, or towards the end of your yoga session, in your vipassana, that relaxes us. That's what deep breathing does. That's what any type of exercise does. Listening to music, painting, cooking, whatever is your meditative practice. And then the sympathetic nervous system is that first thing that fires away when our alarms go off at 6 or 7 in the morning and everything begins to be a rush. Our body and our cardiovascular system needs a balance. Yeah. And when we're always revved up in that stress mode, that fight or flight state, you don't create any relaxation to your heart and your cardiovascular system. And this may be one of the clues why people live longer. So that's a long answer for a short question.
But that's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, so what's really fascinating is I don't know if you heard the blue zones. Do you know what the blue zones are? So blue zones are these areas around the world that folks live in their hundreds.
Okay. Gotcha.
So these scientists are trying to figure out why in the world do people in Okinawa, Costa Rica, parts of Italy, and believe it or not, the only place in the United States is Loma Linda area, La Jolla. Why are those groups of patients or people live into the 90s and 100s?
Yeah.
So there's 4 pillars of good health. One is some sort of movement or physical activity every day. 2 is having some nutritional good diet, whether it be organic meat or no meat, but some very healthy nutritional diet. 3 is having an intention and a purpose to your day. And then 4th is having some contemplative practice, meditation, writing, journaling, cooking, gardening, whatever it is that dedicates to yourself to allow the self-care.
Yeah, I 100% identify with that. When I'm in tune with all of those, it's like everything just works. Yeah. We call it doing the work. Is having attention to those things.
Yeah. So what you're bringing up is a psychological term called the flow state.
Flow state.
Right?
Yeah.
And so the flow state was dubbed by this very famous Hungarian psychologist years ago. And essentially, it's that period of time where everything is independent of space and time, which means you may be so focused on that one thing, you forgot what was happening. Mm-hmm. And that's what we're trying to do in life, is to get the flow state.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. I hadn't planned on talking about this, but you brought it up when you said that the crime dropped when the people were meditating. Yeah. So Eckhart, he talks about this thing, the collective consciousness, and I've said to people, the more people that meditate, the more people that practice, the lower everyone's stress levels are around the world, and it has this ripple effect. But I had, to have it explained like that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, again, going into, because today's talk is about how does meditation affect your health. So to support that concept and that theory that was established years ago, by the way, we have now science to support that. So what's happening at the brain level? So there is this structure called the amygdala. The amygdala is our emotional limbic center. Then there are centers in the brain that are called the default mode network. The default mode network is responsible for that inner chatter that we all have when we wake up in the middle of the night or the first thing in the morning, and that never goes away. Right? So that default mode network can be suppressed. And the amygdala, when fired, which you don't want it to be fired or active, can also be suppressed. How do you do that? Through meditation. Yeah. And this specific type of meditation can actually be a difference, and that's the other really double-layered piece to this whole thing. Which category of meditation really creates that ability to be in that Zen, no self mindset, as the Buddhists call it, the no self state. And so, attention awareness is a really big one, because now you are focusing your attention on something else, which then calms those circuits in your brain, which then you're less likely to become more reactive, and your ego is less likely to be active, and therefore crime rate and everything else drops substantially, and we're better off.
Yeah, that's so cool. It's so cool to hear the science behind it. These are things I teach in the yoga classes, and I know them to be true through my own experience, but I haven't really had the science broken down. And so that's just so cool to hear your perspective and how all of that works. That's pretty awesome. Yeah. How are we doing, guys? Heck yeah, I'm all about living forever. Love it. I love the proven health benefits without use of medication. 100%. Yeah. So do you think that through meditation, a regular meditation practice, it reduces your need for certain medications over time?
Yeah, I mean, so for example, this is what we're going through right now, right? I mean, this is something that no one is not susceptible to in any arena of the world, and we all have a certain level of angst, apprehension, anxiety, right? And these tools can help through this transition that we're going through. But with anxiety, which is a significant issue now, for many reasons, and depression, we are now in this fast food society culture where we want a pill to suppress it. But in reality, that doesn't get down to the roots of what the issue is. Yeah. And so there's plenty of data and randomized controlled information that when you are in a self-care state, whether it be meditation, yoga, exercise, again, any other forms of meditative practice, you are less likely to be critical with yourself, and therefore you're more likely to recover from those anxiety and anxious states. So with meditation specifically, if with time and practice, you can then be able to be attentive to those thoughts that normally you would go hours throughout the day, and now, hopefully, with time, 10, 15, 20 minutes, recognize, wait a minute, where am I going with this? Let's come back. And the usual anchor is your breath. That's what they usually say in the world of meditation. Yeah. But these are the sort of things that you can do. And they have shown MRI studies and questionnaires that depression and anxiety dramatically reduces when you apply yourself to a regular, consistent meditative practice.
Consistent.
That's the key
word.
Right?
Consistency. Yeah. Consistency and frequency.
And so that's another thing, and of course for me, I'm very busy in my world, and I wish I could sit down and do the whole 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. But that's really difficult for almost anyone to do. But there are times throughout the day where you don't recognize it, but you have some times to take a minute to check in with yourself, 30 seconds to take a couple of deep breaths, close your eyes, just get into it, and then refocus again.
Yeah.
So, sometimes I set my phone alarm when I'm doing certain things throughout the day at work, and I know I can have the ability just to stop and take a couple of deep breaths, and I'll do that to get back into the swing of things. And those are things that you can be very creative and do.
Yeah.
And again, all this time creates a mental muscle. It's like going to the gym or doing your, the yoga poses. Yes, it may take a while to do the down dog or the warrior, but if you practice another minute or 2 minutes at home or stretch here and there, you develop that muscle just like you develop the mental muscle, and it accrues over time.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. So, and a lot of times when I talk about meditation with students or just people in general, the first thing I hear is, I'm bad at it, I just can't turn my thoughts off. And so can you speak a little bit to how that's normal and how you can almost allow those thoughts, and as soon as you allow it, they almost leave.
Sure, right.
So how it's totally normal.
Yeah. Okay, first let me preface by saying I've been meditating since 2013, regular basis, but not that 20-minute, and I still do this, okay? Yeah. And it's still completely present. And I'm also trying to figure out the secret sauce to this. So it's really challenging, but I read books and I go online and I try to learn from others and podcasts and so forth. What I realize, it's the attitude to your thoughts what makes the difference. And that epiphany occurred very recently for me.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is, so it's having the attention that you have a thought, acknowledging that it's a thought. You have to label it. We all say, just a moment, but you have to label it. Sometimes you even have to say it out loud by saying it's a thought, or, this is a thought, or I'm thinking this. Attention, acknowledgement, And then once you acknowledge that there's a thought, having the right attitude to yourself to recognize that that thought is whatever happened, even if it distracts you for 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, that do not be hard on yourself. And understanding to then bring your focus and shift right back in to aligning with yourself. And so attention, acknowledgement, and then attitude towards the thought that you just had, even if you're away for like 30 minutes, like, what the heck was I just doing? Just being true to yourself and not being negative to yourself makes a tremendous difference. And that phase is a practice of mindfulness.
Yeah, for sure.
So mindfulness around the daily world, right? Practicing mindfulness day to day means not sitting in the corner and meditating. It means that when we are distracted with thoughts, we recognize we're in the thoughts and they come back. That's the art of being mindful, present.
Right.
In order to get to that stage, you have to prime the brain. The brain is full of catecholamines the first time we wake up. That's the normal physiological response that we all have. You can't change that. This is why we are who we are today, because survival of the fittest told us when dawn breaks, get running because you could be taken out by an animal and so forth. So unfortunately, over a period of time, we built up our prefrontal cortex. Now, that prefrontal cortex made us who we are as a species, but unfortunately also created this other aspect, which is higher cognitive thinking. And now that's with an analytical mode and the brain come in, which we have to sort of find the balance.
Yeah, for sure. And it's almost like as soon as you acknowledge that it is a thought, you disidentify from it. And when you disidentify from it, it loses its power over you.
That's right. And so the other thing to also keep in mind is, and I have to remind myself often, the mind is known to have chatter. That is the function of the mind. The mind is not actually geared by default to be quiet. So if we know that the mind is supposed to do this, then it's our job to be gentle with the mind. And so the other aspect of this, the mind has different tones. In the Buddhist world, they call that different tones. So what does that mean? So you may wake up one day very relaxed. And you're like, I just went into that transcendental stage. That was quick, 2-3 minutes. I'm really good to go. And then there's some days where it takes you 20 minutes and you still can't get anything done. So that is the feeling tone of your underlying mind. And it's important to be able to essentially prepare and have the intention when you start your meditative practice to know what you're dealing with, all right? So, for example, when you want to go to the gym, all right, I'm going to work out this because this is my schedule, and you're like, I'm feeling really sore. Maybe I'm not going to work on my biceps, and I'm going to do something else. It's kind of similar to that in a way, conceptually, meaning, well, if my mind is really active right now when I go first and close my eyes, God, my mind is all over the place, it's scattered, maybe I need to take a few deep breaths or do a yoga practice or do a stretch practice or maybe go and run for a little bit so that I then switch into the parasympathetic nervous system. So it's like biohacking in a way.
Yeah.
And then you can easily get into that space of mindfulness or meditation. But sometimes you need that switch.
100%. It's why I'm so passionate about power yoga, is because I'm so much more receptive to meditation after all of that hard work.
Exactly.
And when we get to the end, that's like if I'm practicing by myself, the meditation comes maybe for 15-20 minutes right after the end of practice, when you're just spent and your brain, it's changed gears. And then I'm able to access a level of consciousness much more, without not necessarily much more easily, but without as much interruptions. It's like you're already there, you just now you can open the door.
Yeah, so what you're describing is what this very famous Stanford psychologist by the name of Kelly McDonald, she writes a bunch of books on health and wellness, yoga, and how we should react to stress, and how movement, her latest book is Movement and Stress Response. There is something that happens biologically when we exercise, runner's high. Runner's high is a pathway that is part of the CBD pathway, actually, the cannabinoid pathway, that leads to that high, which then basically creates a reset. And that allows you to then go into what you just described, which is a higher level of consciousness. What is a higher level of consciousness? That level of consciousness has been prohibited by our ego state, our chatter, our circuits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would you say to someone who said, and you touched on this a little bit with why the chatter's there, but as far as the content of the chatter, the specific negativity that plagues us every day, where would you say, because I get asked this a lot, where do thoughts come from?
Yes.
What where in your experience are they coming from?
All right, so great question. So I'm not sure I can answer it too specifically. I can give you the information I know.
Yeah.
So I was alluding to default mode network. There are structures in our brain that have been demonstrated with functional MRI studies to be the basis and the origin of our thoughts. Unfortunately, by evolutionary method, we always have more implicit negative biases or memories than we do have positive ones. It's a shame. And there's another concept with that is that we have neuroplasticity, which means that the more negative thoughts that you believe and listen to, it wires those same neurons and it's contagious. And this is why anxiety has become such a tremendous issue. Mm-hmm. We have social media that people like or dislike what you're doing, etc., on Instagram or Facebook or whatever it may be. And so now we've bought into it, and now we're accustomed to that. And so why we actually create a thought is yet to be determined. Obviously, it's a piece of energy. That's one thing to understand. A thought is a piece of energy that goes through your consciousness. And that piece of energy, believe it or not, has really no value until you gave it attention. And that's the problem, is that we give it attention. Hence why those negative thoughts ruminate over and over again. And so, there are some famous neuroscientists, one by the name of Rick Hansen, who always believes that when somebody pays you a compliment, or you had a good day, we should actually pause, nourish it, think about it, dwell on it, reflect on it, and almost have a gratitude journal, as Oprah always talks about, and that creates that change in your mind.
Because we're doing that automatically from the negative ones. So it would make sense to counter that would be to focus on those positive
Right.
ones.
And eventually there are plenty of information that I can speak anecdotally for myself. When I first started till to now, your mindset does shift from always being negative to maybe less negative. I'm not here to tell you meditation will change your life completely. It's not going to make you 100% different, but it's going to definitely change you towards that. It's going to give you the lens that we've all been wanting, which is to live life in the best way we can and enjoy what we have because we don't know what's next.
Your level, I would say with my experience, my level of enjoyment just in day-to-day things skyrocketed through these mindfulness practices where I could find joy in waiting in line, which that was a huge practice for me for about a year. It was every time I was waiting in line for something, I would try to notice the irritation, the impatience, and turn it into joy.
Yeah.
And it's about raising your level of joy in just every moment. Just because, like you said, we're not here very long, and why not get the best, make the most of it, get the most from it.
Yeah. And be also your best version, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your audience is very different from probably the lay people that want to listen to this or may not listen to this. You have a very highly motivated audience that wants to involve themselves in a lifestyle so they can be a better version of themselves. So that's another piece of this is what is the inherent motivation of the individual trying to do this? And because a lot of scientists believe that meditation is a placebo effect. It's a mind over matter or mind over body effect. As a physician, when we do clinical trials or do certain procedures, a patient is more likely to feel that they've gotten something better when I write a prescription for an antibiotic. Even though, technically speaking, they don't need an antibiotic, but they feel better. That is a mind response. And that tells you the powerfulness of the mind over your body.
Yeah.
So you got to change your inner world to be able to see the outer world, I guess, as they say.
Oh, 100%. And that's the first thing I say is the practice I'm in right now is realizing that we're wrong. And I think once you realize that and make that connection, everything shifts, and you take ownership over what you've created, and then you either like it and continue to create more of it, or you decide to create something else.
That's right.
So yeah, it's awesome. But back to what you said, it doesn't take, somebody like, I can't sit there for 30 minutes. It doesn't take 30 minutes, 20 minutes. A little bit goes a long way. Where can you insert 5 minutes, 60 seconds, things like that, throughout your day will have a huge impact.
Yeah. And so I first started, I told you I went to that course. Mm-hmm. I went to the introductory course on Friday night. It was a course for the weekend. They did a 20-minute thing. Oh, I couldn't do it. I was like, I'm not doing this. This is impossible. I was like, I'm not going to do this. It was not until a few months later that I went to my first course in Sedona, Arizona, and it took me to be in that state where you have zero distractions to really get into this to understand the effects. Yeah. And sometimes it may take that sort of seminar to really understand, because once you do get that change that you notice, you will want more of it. Mm-hmm. And then it's just a minutes here and there, and sometimes even a couple minutes can make a really big change in the first thing in the morning of how you start your day. Mm-hmm. And again, like I said, as you accrue over time, you also accrue big changes.
Yeah, for sure. I had a similar experience to that with Yoga Nidra in my last teacher training, which if my instructor's watching this, I never said that she would make us do Yoga Nidra at the end of every day's worth of training, and every day I was like, not again. I was so resistant to it, and then it just being forced into that repetition. By the end of the week, I actually experienced my mind being awake while my body was asleep, and I was like, holy crap! and had so many breakthroughs that week. But there was a lot of nights where I was just not having it,
Yeah. And again, as I said, I've been practicing for a number of years now, but it's still challenging. And I'm learning now what resonates with me, and that's another key for the listener. Try to experiment with all types of techniques and experts out there. I still do. I still gain something new from a podcast or a book I read. I'm a spiritual junkie by nature anyway, so it's fun. For me, it's not wasting my time, But, you change your practice and you'll learn what works for you. So I figured out that because I'm more, I have to see things black and white, just because I'm more scientific. In that way, my brain is wired that way. And so now I have written down, I've gotten to a point where I wrote down now the steps. And it allows me to almost have a cheat sheet. So when this happens, I know exactly what to do. And so for other people, it's different. But you just have to find
what works for you.
What works for you. Yeah. Just like anything else. Just like any workout or anything else for that matter.
Yeah, there's so many different styles of meditation, and I definitely have gravitated towards some for some periods, like guided, and then other times, So it is really about finding what speaks to you, and then know that what works for you one month, it might not work the next month, and that comes with being in the moment, and the mindfulness to show up brand new each time, show up empty, and like you, I love what you said about. I'm so glad. I hope that this is recording because I love so much of what you said. But I love what you said about your attitude towards the thought, and being kind to yourself and having patience. Because, like you said, that makes all the difference.
Sure.
And how cool is it that you had that?
It's epiphany. Yeah. Literally, it happened just recently. Mm-hmm. I was like, the 4 A's, and I started writing it down. So now I read the 4 A's: action, attention, acknowledgement, and attitude, and it's really changed my practice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so and just like anything else, you spend more time to it, and you figure out smaller things, and you figure out your inner world. A lot of us have a lot of stuff, a lot of shit going on. We just gotta unravel that sometimes, and we spend a lot of time on the phones and social media, and there's people that turn to negative vices, and that's also not healthy too. So a good tool to have.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome. Yeah.
Should we do some Q&A?
Yeah. So.
Unless
let's
they
see.
they log off.
Let's see what happens. I could talk to you about this all night.
Me too.
All right. It's all about attitude. Keep it positive. My health has improved dramatically since starting meditation. I just started about 6 months ago. I'm still amazed. Someone agreed, important to be patient and kind with it. Yes, raise your vibrations by focusing on the positive. Yes, we dwell on the negative and need to switch to dwelling on the positive. It seems like a bunch of people agreeing with everything you're saying, like I am. So, preach it, brother. That's a great tip about knowing what you're dealing with that was really good. Knowing about what you're dealing with when you get ready to start meditation and preparing for it beforehand. Thanks. So she really made that tip. Does anybody have any... Oh, we got a question here. Are you saying you should honor your emotions during meditation? I've never meditated.
Honoring emotions.
Honor your emotions.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good question. If honoring means, should you not push your thoughts away or your emotions, then yes. And that's another concept to really understand, which took me a long time. Still, again, I'm work in progress. Everyone believes that meditation should be, you should sit down, all of a sudden you should be empty of thoughts. Actually, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah.
If you're going to try to stop yourself from thinking, you're going to think.
Mm-hmm.
So the concept is to be able to view your stream of consciousness, i.e. your thoughts, as like a ticker that just kind of flies by, or the clouds that kind of flies by, and not hang on to it. And if you are in that feeling tone where you're melancholic or depressive or anxious, then it's important to practice a different type of meditation, which is more of a insight meditation, or vipassana, which is if you have a negative or feeling low, trying to uncover why that may be the case and try to go deeper into that. And that's a different type of meditation,
Right.
which for a lot of people who are not used to doing it can be quite frightening, because all of a sudden you have a lot of internal emotions that you may have not known because you've suppressed, or now it's a little bit more clear, can be quite traumatic.
Yeah.
So that's also really important to understand. But we should never push away our emotions or thoughts. That's the whole purpose of the concept of practicing mindfulness meditation, is accepting it but don't judge them.
Right. That creates a whole nother resistance and a whole nother sort of
negative energy.
It's
block.
negative energy, and I think exactly what you're saying, allowing it to be there, and being the watcher of it, watching
the observer.
The watcher and the observer. Different spiritual leaders said that it all points to the same thing.
That's
and 100%. So I think that when you allow it and watch it, you are honoring your emotions in that sense, that you're not forcing
not
them
suppressing.
away. Yeah,
Right.
not suppressing.
Right.
Cool. Okay, let's see what else we got. What type of yoga would you suggest? Or I'm sorry, she said not yoga, meditation. What type of meditation would you suggest for a beginner? I think you've kind of already answered it.
Yeah, I mean, if you take our course, that's hopefully coming soon, you could be exposed to all different types, and then you sort of figure out what's right for you.
Right.
I always, by default, dive into mindfulness, breath, attention, meditation. And there are some mornings or evenings or whatever that I just can't do it, and I switch to a different type of meditation. And so I think it's important to be exposed to all of them and to understand what you're trying to accomplish or what you're trying to get out of, so you can understand what resonates again for yourself. But probably by default, what is seen everywhere right now in the media outlet and the news is mindfulness. But we didn't talk about another form, which is called transcendental meditation, or TM. And for example, this morning, I could not really get into that mindfulness state, and so I quickly flipped to TM, which is more of a mantra, repeating something very simple like Om, or any other sort of message repeatedly, and I was able to really align myself into that groove I was looking for, and then go into the breath attention awareness.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how the Om works, just again from a scientific perspective. Om, when you say that loud, you are creating vibration in your ears.
Right.
And in a way, what it does is it creates a whole influx of neurotransmitters that, in a way, may actually accelerate the process to be quiet.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really cool. So,
really cool.
And you can always kind of switch to something else as well. So,
yeah.
I think not the simplest one, probably the one that it's more commonly ability to learn on YouTube or any of the apps that your guided meditation is typically mindfulness. But, and I talked about TM, and a third really good one that it's called Metta, M-E-T-T-A, or loving kindness meditation. And sometimes that's easier for some folks, which is where you are having some imagery or thoughts about compassion and love and kindness towards somebody else. Yeah. And sometimes that becomes easier for some people as well.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And so, like, what I'm hearing is, ask yourself, what's your goal? What is your goal with the meditation? What are you trying to accomplish? And like what you were saying with everything that's going on right now, if stress relief is your goal, then maybe focusing on your breath, a breath-based meditation, mindfulness meditation to slow the fear might be beneficial. So, it's like you said, you have your toolbox and you pull out what's needed in the moment based on what your goal is or what the...
Yeah, and so that's true, but at the same point, in order to be good at one thing, they say you have to do it over and over again, right? And so it's always a good idea to be exposed to all different types of meditation, but it'd probably be a better idea to find one that you feel most comfortable with so that you practice that.
Yeah.
Because 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes, and then you can start seeing the sizable changes, and it's noticeable, not only within yourself, but the people around you will start to notice, wow, a lot more calmer. Are you okay?
Yeah, I get that.
Those other things.
When I started practicing, I got that from my family a lot.
Yeah.
What's going on
Yeah.
there?
And then, sometimes we have a lot of thoughts racing, and you're like, okay, this is a waste of my time. I need to go with work because there's so many things going on. Sometimes just journaling a few of your thoughts on paper. Or again, something I recently uncovered, on our iPhone, there is the audio diary. And instead of writing, because for some reason, when I write, I'm afraid to write. I get writer's block, and the reason I get writer's block, even though I've got a shit ton of stuff in my head, is because I'm afraid that what I write may not make sense. So when I read it, in the future, I would probably have a negative reaction to it, so I don't write it. Okay? Wow. That's what I figured out. So instead, I just speak for like 2 or 3 minutes, and it's released all my thoughts, and then I start to meditate. And I noticed that transition is easy.
You let all that go first, and that's really cool. I haven't done the audio thing.
Yeah, it's just, it's on our iPhone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to give that a try.
Yeah.
Let's see. Have you done research on PTSD and meditation? Any insights? Thanks.
Yeah. So PTSD, anxiety, depression, emotional trauma, all these states, these negative imbalanced states, all have been shown to improve dramatically with forms of meditation. It's really important, though, if you have PTSD and other aspects, depending on the level of PTSD, in my opinion, start with it. But if you notice that you're uncovering very paralyzing, negative emotions that really affect you that you haven't dealt with before, it might be really important to find also a cognitive behavioral therapist to help you work through those emotions and be able to label those emotions. And that's another thing. If you cognitive behavioral therapy is really important. It's labeling our thoughts. And basically, my meditation is a type of that. You're getting deeper without going to a psychologist. You're doing it on your own, right? And although it's different and it's more of a struggle because you're doing it on your own, but you will learn a lot more about yourself through that difficulty. But also understanding to label your thoughts and labeling these emotions are really crucial to helping that thought now not become an emotion. So a thought then becomes an emotion, and then it's in that subcortical circuit, and guess what? The day is done.
Yep. Day's ruined.
Yeah.
Checked out.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Good question.
Yeah, very good question.
Someone said a gratitude journal. What a wonderful idea. Have you ever been to a sound bath for meditation? Would you recommend it?
A sound bath. I've heard of it. I have not been there. I am aware of other types of physical gadgets, such as a floating salt pool. And I think I have not been there, but I heard there's a center called Mode.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know if you've been
there. I've heard of it.
They have these sort of gadgets to help you get into that meditative state, but no, I have not tried any of those things. Music is powerful. There are lots of studies going on right now at Harvard by a very famous psychiatrist, last name Pillai, P-I-L-L-I, Srini Pillai. Anyway, he's looking at all types of different music, notes of music, types of music, that when listened to, can then get into that meditative phase without going through the rigorous 20-minute meditation.
Wow.
And there's also virtual reality, goggles, and all types of really fascinating stuff that's coming out. But yeah, I think all these things should be tried, for sure. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to take just you in that chair and silence to finally break through. And whether you postpone it or you start now is the crucial step.
Yeah, I think that's so important to know, because we have the answers. Like you said, it's about uncovering them.
Yeah.
So these external things can help you get to that point, but ultimately it's inside of you, and you know the answer, you have the answers, and it's uncovering it one layer after another.
Absolutely.
Did you say classes are in the future? So yeah.
We've been talking about this for a while. In fact, today was supposed to be our first live course, but obviously considering what's been going on in today's world, we're improving. So hopefully in the future we can have I'd like to teach an 8-week course on the different types. And again, I will preface this again, I am not an expert. Okay, I am a work in progress just like everybody else. So I can just introduce it and help others through it and give what I have learned. And I spent a lot of time on my own trying to figure this out for the past, 7-8 years. But, I would always recommend some introduction course just to get the momentum going and being around like-minded people. It's easier to resonate and you feel like you get motivated. It's almost like a peer support group in some ways, like your yoga class. People want to keep coming back because you've got a collective intention to do it, and that's the key.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, it is gonna happen. Yes. Someone asked if the gong works the same way as Om.
In a way, it does. It sort of resonates in that same circuitry. It can, the singing bowl of Om,
Someone asked if you've ever used the Muse headband and app, which could bring us to another great quick question you could touch on. Do you have any apps that you currently use or would recommend for somebody who's looking to start exploring?
Yeah. So great question on the Muse. I loved all the biotech stuff coming out. I was mentioning about the VR and the AR and the music and all that. So with Muse, I was very close to purchasing it about a few years ago. I had a friend who was using it, and she's actually an instructor, and she kind of told me it wasn't really what it was intended to be. So I shied away from it. There are other apps available. There's Calm, there's Headspace. I have Oak. It's another just a free app. But honestly, what I have used more often has been YouTube, and podcasts. So actually, what I would recommend your audience, really, if you wanted a place to start and listen on your own time and really get into the weeds and the details taught by some experts, then the podcasts, there are two. There's one called the Insight Meditation Society, and the other is called Common Ground. These are both meditation societies. Insight Meditation is in Barre, Massachusetts, and it was developed and founded by three very famous meditation teachers in the United States, Sharon Salzberg, Jack Kornfield, and Jeffrey Goldstein, who are like the gurus. They're the ones who spent back in the 60s and 70s and 80s in Southeast Asia when meditation wasn't anything, wasn't in vogue, and then they came back and they created this society and they created this beautiful retreat. I have not been there, but I've seen pictures. But I listened to all their podcasts almost routinely, and they're all available for free online. And I would start there. That's
awesome.
actually where
Can
I
you
would.
repeat those?
Yeah.
If one of my teachers out there could write those down, I'd appreciate it.
It's called the Insight Meditation Society. And the other one is called Common Ground. Common Ground Meditation Center and the Insight Meditation Society. Those two are phenomenal.
Perfect. Awesome. Good question. Got a few more people asking for good apps. You just answered that. What was the name of that professor from Stanford who wrote books on yoga and meditation?
Yeah. Kelly McDonigal, McDonigal, McDonigal. You could also YouTube her talks, her TED Talks, and she's been interviewed by a number of people on podcasts as well. And she talks about a very important concept regarding stress. This is really cool. So, stress, according to the CDC, is the #1 association with common medical conditions. Mm-hmm. It's responsible for almost everything in some way or fashion or other. But, stress is always not bad.
I was going to just say, could you give them the difference between good stress and bad stress?
So there's eustress, which is EUSTRESS, and there's distress. Mm-hmm. Obviously, distress is a stress that paralyzes us, that affects our immune system, that makes us, unfortunately, choose bad choices, creates insomnia. Then there's eustress, EUSTRESS, which is what drives us, what motivates us, what gets us to going and gets us to what we need to do. And so what she has done, which is really fascinating, she's put a different perspective on stress, and she's shown that stress is actually not a bad thing at all. In fact, it's a good thing. She's shown studies to demonstrate that stress is a good thing. What is bad is how you perceive stress.
Wow, okay.
Perceive stress.
Yeah.
And again, how are you able to perceive something that's negative in your mind or something that's happened to you without knowing this is a positive or negative thing, or pausing when you've been affected by it? The only way to detach from that limbic system and not be reactive, or to come back faster with resilience, is to have meditation built in you, because then you can slow that process. Yeah. So it's really fascinating.
That's awesome. Yeah. Wow. This is my favorite conversation all week.
Well, you're right. Me too.
I know I usually have to force people to talk to me about this stuff.
Junkies.
Yeah. That's awesome. Someone said thank you for the distress, the differentiation of the stress. Hey Brad, how are you? Got a lot of thumbs up. A lot of positive comments. Yeah, I mean, this is so cool that you did this, and I just greatly appreciate it. I didn't want to, I really wanted to still bring it to people, given the state of things. So, I mean, even just listening to you, like, I feel lighter, because of your level of presence. Isn't that cool?
Oh, that is really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for your questions. We got a lot of people saying thank you. Lots of thumbs up. So thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for your questions. And we will have more for sure. So just thank you for this. We needed to get back into meditation. Totally need this during this time. It helped my son a lot when he was younger. Definitely. Thank you for the time and sharing your knowledge. This was great. Thank you. Yeah, so I agree. This was awesome.
Cool.
I'm so appreciative. Thank you so much.
Gratitude.
And we'll see you guys soon.